There's a quiet mistake most men keep making, and the worst part is, they don't even realize it's the reason they're being overlooked. They think attraction is loud. They think it's about standing out with money, achievements, confidence, or saying the right things at the right time. So they try harder, they talk more, they perform more, they try to be impressive. And yet, somehow, they still end up in the same place, getting polite responses, short conversations, and no real emotional pull. Here's the truth that stings a little. Being noticed is not the same as being remembered. A woman can enjoy a conversation with you, smile, laugh, even compliment you, and still forget about you the moment you're gone. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you didn't create anything that stayed with her. You didn't interrupt the pattern she experiences every single day. Because think about this for a second. How many men approach women with the exact same energy, the same surface-level questions, the same predictable conversations, the same subtle attempt to impress? It all blends together. It becomes noise. And when everything feels the same, nothing stands out. The real shift happens when you stop trying to be impressive and start becoming memorable. And being memorable has nothing to do with showing off. It has everything to do with how you make her feel in your presence. Not surface-level feelings like excitement or amusement, but something deeper, something that makes her pause, think, and feel slightly different than she usually does around people. That's where most men miss it. They focus on what they can say about themselves instead of what they can unlock in her. And the moment you understand that difference, everything about the way you approach attraction begins to change. Because the man who creates a moment she doesn't expect becomes the man she can't easily forget. Most men don't lose a woman's interest because they're unattractive or lacking something important. They lose it because they unknowingly blend into a pattern she's already tired of. And once you understand that, you start to see why so many interactions feel like they go nowhere, no matter how much effort is put in. Look at how the average conversation usually goes. It starts with basic questions. What do you do? Where are you from? What do you like to do for fun? On the surface, there's nothing wrong with these questions. They're safe, they're easy, and they keep things moving. But that's exactly the problem. They're so common that they require no real thought, no emotional investment, and no curiosity from her side. She can answer them almost automatically, like she's following a script she's already memorized. And when a conversation feels scripted, it doesn't create impact. It just passes time. Then comes the next mistake. Most men shift into presentation mode. They start talking about themselves, trying to highlight their best qualities, their experiences, their achievements. They believe that if they show enough value, she'll naturally become interested. But what actually happens is the opposite. Instead of creating connection, they create distance, because now the interaction feels like a subtle performance, not a genuine exchange. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Women are incredibly good at recognizing patterns. When she senses that a man is trying to impress her in a way she's seen before, her mind quietly categorizes him. Not in a harsh way, but in a familiar one. Predictable, safe, easy to forget. It's not that she dislikes him, it's that nothing about him interrupts her expectations. That's the real danger. Not rejection, but neutrality. Because when there's no emotional shift, no curiosity, no moment that makes her think twice, the conversation ends exactly where it started, and you walk away wondering what you did wrong, when in reality, you just did what everyone else does. This is where things start to shift, because attraction isn't just one thing. It operates on two completely different levels at the same time, and most men only ever focus on one of them, the visible one, the obvious one, the physical side. Appearance, confidence, presence, style, all of that matters, but it only gets your foot in the door. It doesn't keep her there. The deeper layer, the one that actually creates lasting pull, is psychological. This is the part that isn't talked about enough, because you can't fake it with quick tricks or surface-level tactics. Psychological attraction is what makes a woman think about you after the interaction ends. It's what makes her replay moments in her mind, trying to figure out what felt different. It's subtle, but it's powerful. Here's how it works. When a woman interacts with most men, her brain stays in a kind of autopilot mode. She's heard similar conversations, similar questions, similar energy so many times that she doesn't need to fully engage. She can predict where things are going. And when the outcome feels predictable, her emotional investment stays low. But the moment something breaks that pattern, everything changes. When she feels mentally stimulated, when she has to actually pause and think, when she experiences a moment she didn't expect, her attention sharpens. She becomes present, and more importantly, she becomes curious. Not just about the conversation, but about you. That's the beginning of real attraction. Because curiosity is what pulls her in. Emotional safety is what keeps her there. And when those two combine, something rare happens. She starts to feel comfortable expressing parts of herself she doesn't usually reveal so easily. And here's the key most men miss. You don't create that by trying to stand out louder. You create it by going deeper, by shifting the conversation in a way that feels natural but unexpected. That's when you stop being just another interaction and start becoming an experience she actually remembers. To really understand why this works, you have to step into her world for a moment. Not from your perspective, but from hers. Because what most men see on the outside is only a small part of what she actually experiences on a daily basis. She gets attention, a lot of it. Compliments about how she looks, comments about her style, people noticing her presence. And at first glance, it might seem like that's exactly what creates attraction. But over time, that kind of attention starts to lose its impact. Not because it's bad, but because it becomes repetitive, predictable, easy to process without feeling anything real. Now think about her conversations. How often do they follow the same pattern? The same safe topics, the same light jokes, the same surface-level curiosity that never really goes anywhere. Most interactions never require her to slow down and actually think. She can respond while half distracted, while checking her phone, while already knowing what's coming next. And when everything feels familiar, nothing feels meaningful. This is the part most men completely overlook. She's not lacking attention, she's lacking depth. She's lacking moments that make her pause, reflect, and feel something different than what she's used to. That's why a simple shift in how you communicate can change everything. When you introduce something unexpected, something that doesn't follow the usual pattern, you create contrast. And contrast is what grabs attention at a deeper level. It forces her out of autopilot and into awareness. Suddenly, she's not just responding out of habit, she's actually present in the moment. And presence is where connection begins. Because when a woman feels like she has to think, not in a stressful way, but in a curious, reflective way, she becomes more engaged without even realizing it. And that engagement isn't forced, it's natural. It's the kind that builds slowly, but stays longer. That's the difference between being another conversation she forgets and becoming the one she keeps thinking about later. This is where everything comes together, because the real shift doesn't happen in what you say about yourself. It happens in what you make her feel about herself when she's around you. And the most powerful feeling you can create isn't excitement or even attraction at first. It's recognition. There's a big difference between looking at someone and actually seeing them. Most people observe. They notice surface details, they react to what's obvious, they engage with the version of a person that's easy to access. But very few people take the time or have the awareness to go deeper than that. And when someone finally does, it stands out immediately. When a woman feels seen, not just for how she looks or how she presents herself, but for how she thinks, how she processes things, how she experiences the world, something shifts internally. She relaxes. Not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle one. The guard she usually keeps up around new people starts to lower without her forcing it. Because she's not being evaluated. She's being understood. That feeling is rare. And anything that feels rare becomes valuable. Most men try to create attraction by adding more talking, more energy, more effort. But the real power comes from removing the need to perform. When you create space instead of filling it, when you guide the conversation instead of dominating it, she naturally steps into that space and reveals more of herself. And here's the part that makes it unforgettable. The more she expresses something real, something personal, something she doesn't usually share, the more she starts to associate you with that experience. Not consciously, but emotionally. You become linked to that moment of openness. That's why being seen goes far beyond a good conversation. It creates an imprint. It turns a simple interaction into something that lingers in her mind long after it ends. And once that happens, you're no longer just another person she met. You become someone she felt something around. This is where most people completely underestimate what's happening beneath the surface of a simple conversation. Because a well-placed question isn't just a way to keep things flowing. It's a psychological trigger. It shifts how the other person experiences the interaction in real time. Think about it. The average question doesn't require much effort to answer. It sits on the surface. It pulls from memory, not emotion. But the right question does something very different. It interrupts the usual pattern and forces the mind to slow down. It creates a small pause, and that pause is where everything begins. Because in that moment, she's no longer responding automatically. She's actually thinking. And thinking leads to feeling. When a question makes someone reflect, even briefly, it activates parts of their mind that aren't usually engaged in everyday conversation. It pulls them inward. It makes them search for something real instead of giving a rehearsed response. And when that happens, the conversation stops being external and starts becoming internal. That's what makes it powerful. You're not just exchanging words anymore, you're guiding an experience. And here's the part most men don't realize. When someone goes through that kind of internal reflection while talking to you, they begin to associate you with that experience. Not just the words, but the feeling of depth, the sense of being understood, the quiet curiosity that builds in the moment. It's subtle, but it leaves a mark. That's why the right question can do more than 10 minutes of talking ever could. It doesn't overwhelm. It doesn't try to impress. It simply opens a door and lets her walk through it at her own pace. But intention matters here. If the question feels forced or calculated, it breaks the effect instantly. It has to come from genuine curiosity, from a calm presence that isn't rushing to get somewhere. Because when it's done right, you're not leading a conversation. You're creating something she actually feels. Now, this is where you start to apply everything you've understood so far. Because knowing the psychology is one thing, but using it in a real conversation is what actually creates the shift. And the first 3 questions you're about to use are designed to do one thing very clearly. Pull her out of surface-level thinking and into genuine reflection. The first question is simple, but it goes deeper than it seems. You ask her about a belief or perspective she used to hold strongly, but no longer agrees with. What this does is quietly guide her into thinking about her own growth. It moves the conversation away from who she is on the surface and into how she has evolved over time. And when someone starts reflecting on their personal changes, they naturally become more engaged, because now they're not just talking, they're remembering, processing, and connecting dots in their own story. The second question shifts into identity. You ask her when she feels most like herself, not the version she shows the world, but the version that feels real and unfiltered. This creates a completely different emotional tone. Instead of discussing external things like work or routine, she starts thinking about moments where she feels aligned, free, and comfortable in her own skin. And as she shares that, something subtle happens. She begins to associate you with that feeling of authenticity. The third question opens the door even further. You remove limitations. You ask her what she would be doing if fear, money, and judgment didn't exist. This question taps into her hidden desires, the things she doesn't always say out loud. And when she speaks about those, she experiences a sense of freedom in that moment. Not because you gave her answers, but because you gave her space to express something real. And that's the key with these first 3 questions. You're not trying to impress her. You're guiding her into an experience she rarely has, one where she feels heard, understood, and free to think beyond the usual boundaries. Now that you've opened that first layer, this is where the connection either deepens or fades back into something forgettable. Because once a woman has started reflecting and sharing a little more of herself, the next step isn't to pull back or switch topics. It's to gently move the conversation into a space where real emotional connection can begin to form. The next 2 questions are designed for exactly that. They're not surface level and they're not casual. They touch identity, self-worth, and the way she sees herself beneath everything she shows the world. The first question here focuses on what she feels she truly deserves when it comes to connection. Not what she's experienced in the past, not what she's settled for, but what she believes she should actually have. This is powerful because it reveals how she values herself internally. Some women will answer confidently, others will hesitate because they've never really thought about it deeply. And that hesitation is important. It shows you where her emotional boundaries and past experiences might be influencing her. The key here isn't to react or correct anything she says. It's to stay calm, present, and grounded. When you hold that space without judgment, you create a sense of safety, and safety is what allows her to open up further without feeling exposed. The second question moves into something even more personal. You ask her what people usually misunderstand about her. This is where the conversation shifts from interesting to intimate, because almost everyone carries something they feel isn't seen or fully understood by others. When she shares that, she's revealing a part of herself that isn't obvious, and in that moment, she's not just talking, she's trusting. That's what separates these questions from everything else. They don't just keep the conversation going, they create a connection that feels real. And when someone feels safe enough to show a side of themselves they usually hide, that moment doesn't disappear easily, it stays. This is where things move from connection to something that actually lingers in her mind long after the conversation ends. Because the final two questions aren't just about understanding her, they tap into her past and her deeper sense of meaning. And when you reach that level, you're no longer just having a conversation. You're becoming part of how she processes herself. The first of these questions takes her backward. You ask her what she would say to a younger version of herself if she had the chance. And what this does is open something emotional without forcing it. She starts thinking about her past, the decisions she made, the lessons she learned, the things she wishes she understood earlier. And when someone reflects like that, it's not just logical, it's emotional. You begin to see layers that aren't visible on the surface, not just who she is now, but what shaped her. And here's the important part. When she shares something like this, don't rush to respond. Don't try to fix anything or turn it into advice. Just listen. Let her sit in that moment, because most people don't get the chance to express those thoughts without interruption. And the fact that you gave her that space makes the experience feel different. The final question shifts from the past into her core values. You ask her what freedom means to her personally, and this is where you start to understand what truly drives her. Not the goals she talks about casually, but what she's actually moving toward in life. For some, it's independence. For others, it's peace or self-expression or the ability to live without pressure. Whatever her answer is, it reveals what matters most beneath everything else. And when you reach this point, something changes. You're no longer just someone she spoke to briefly. You become tied to a moment where she felt understood on a deeper level. And that's the kind of experience that doesn't fade easily. Now, when you step back and look at everything you've just learned, one thing should become very clear. None of this is about techniques in the way most people think. It's not about memorizing questions or delivering them perfectly. Because if that's all you take from this, you'll fall right back into the same trap, sounding rehearsed, predictable, and disconnected. The real difference comes from how you show up. Because the same question, asked with the wrong energy, loses all its impact. But when it comes from a place of calm presence, genuine curiosity, and quiet confidence, it changes the entire experience. She doesn't feel like she's being analyzed or tested. She feels like she's being understood. And that's what makes it powerful. Most men are focused on being chosen. They want to say the right thing, do the right thing, and create the right impression. But the man who stands out isn't chasing approval. He's grounded. He's present. He's not trying to fill every silence or control every moment. He allows space, and in that space, something real can actually form. That's the part that stays with her. Because when a woman walks away from an interaction, she doesn't replay your achievements or the things you said about yourself. She replays how she felt. Did she feel heard? Did she feel safe? Did she feel like she could express something real without being judged? And if the answer is yes, you've already separated yourself from almost everyone else she meets. This isn't about manipulation or playing a role. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that real attraction grows from depth, not noise. So if this made you think differently, I want to hear from you. Which part stood out the most to you, And where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you're serious about understanding connection on a deeper level, make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started.